My family invaded my house, so I made sure they regretted it. Buying a house was supposed to be my biggest achievement, proof that all my hard work had finally paid off. I did it on my own. No handouts, no help, just years of grinding and saving. So, when I got the keys, I was ready for peace, freedom, and a home that was finally mine. But then my phone rang. "Oh, sweetheart, we were just talking about who gets which room." I froze. "What?" My mother's voice was casual, almost cheerful. "Well, you didn't think you'd live there alone, did you?" I should have seen it coming. They had always used me. My money, my time, my success. It had never been mine. It was always ours. And now, my family had assigned themselves rooms in my house like it was their birthright. They thought I'd just go along with it. They thought I'd let them take over the same way they always had. But this time, they had no idea what was coming. Before we jump into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed the channel is losing some traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and it helps us keep bringing you awesome content. Your support means the world. Let's keep this channel growing together. Thanks so much. Now let's start the video. When I bought my house, it was supposed to be a fresh start. My own space, my own rules, no one telling me what to do. I had spent years saving up, working overtime, sacrificing vacations and luxuries so that one day I could have a place to call my own, and I did it. I signed the papers, got the keys, and walked into my house for the first time, feeling like I had won at life. But I should have known. My family never lets me have anything to myself. That first phone call was just the beginning. My mom acted like it was a given that they'd be moving in. "It just makes sense. We're family. We can help each other," she chirped, like she was doing me a favor. And it wasn't just her. My dad, my sister, even my aunt. They had already started making plans that didn't involve me at all. "Your dad wants the biggest bedroom, of course, and your sister will take the one with the nice view. Your aunt can have the guest room. Oh, unless you need that one? Well, you don't really need that much space, do you?" I stood there, gripping my phone so hard my fingers went numb. They weren't asking. They weren't waiting for my approval. They had already decided. Like my house wasn't mine. Like all my work, my savings, my sacrifices, they had been for them. I should have shut it down right then and there. But I hesitated. Because that's what they do. They make me feel guilty. They make it seem like I'm selfish for wanting something for myself. But deep down, I knew this wasn't okay. And I wasn't about to let them walk all over me this time. I should have set boundaries immediately. Should have told them flat out no before they had a chance to make themselves comfortable. But I hesitated, and in that hesitation, they moved in. Not all at once, of course. No, that would have been too obvious. They were smart about it. First, my mom started staying over just for a few nights to help me get settled. Then my dad showed up, fixing things that weren't broken. My sister arrived next, claiming she needed a place to crash while she figured things out. And before I knew it, they were all here. And suddenly, my house wasn't mine anymore. The guest room, taken. The pantry, stocked with their food. The living room, constantly occupied by my dad's loud TV shows. It was like they had always been there, like I was just a guest in my own home. At first, I tried to be patient. I told myself, they'll leave soon, they just need time. But then one night, I overheard something that changed everything. I was in my room, door closed, trying to have just a few minutes of peace. But through the thin walls, I heard my sister laughing. "I can't believe they actually bought a house. Best decision ever. Now we don't have to worry about rent." My stomach dropped. She wasn't grateful. None of them were. To them, my house wasn't mine. It was theirs. That was the moment I knew this had to stop. And if they thought I was going to just let this happen, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. That night, I barely slept. Not because the house was loud, although it was thanks to my dad's blaring TV, but because my mind wouldn't stop racing. My sister's words kept replaying in my head. Now we don't have to worry about rent. They weren't just staying temporarily. They had no plans to leave. I woke up the next morning with a new mindset. Enough was enough. This was my house. My name was on the mortgage. I paid the bills. I worked for it. And if they thought they could squat here indefinitely, they had another thing coming. So I made a plan. Step 1, stop catering to them. Up until now, I had been too nice. stocking the fridge with food they liked, cleaning up after them, being the good host. But why? They weren't guests, they were freeloaders. So I stopped. No more groceries, no more doing their laundry, no more cooking extra meals. If they wanted to eat, they could figure it out themselves. Step 2, make them uncomfortable. I turned the thermostat down to freezing since my dad always complained about being cold. I set up early morning alarms on the home speakers, just loud enough to be annoying. I hogged the bathroom for as long as I wanted. Every little thing they did to inconvenience me, I did it back, tenfold. Step 3, the final push. I needed them to get the hint, but I also needed to be smart about it. If I just kicked them out, they'd pull the "but we're family" card. So instead, I set a deadline. That evening, I called a house meeting. My parents, my sister, they all sat around the living room like they belonged there. I took a deep breath and dropped the bomb. I've decided I want my house back. You all have 2 weeks to find somewhere else to stay. At first, silence. Then my mom laughed like I had just told a joke. Oh, sweetheart, don't be dramatic. But I wasn't laughing. I'm serious. 2 weeks. After that, I'm changing the locks. Now, the panic set in. They weren't expecting this. They thought I'd just let them stay forever. But I was done being the pushover. They had overstayed their welcome, and now I was taking my house back. The second I told them they had 2 weeks to leave, my family's faces went from shock to offense. My mom was the first to react, letting out a dramatic sigh, as if I had just told her she had to live on the streets. Honey, you're being so cold. We're family. You didn't really think you'd be living here alone, did you? Oh, that phrase again. The same one she said when they first assigned themselves rooms in my house. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Yes, actually. That's exactly what I thought. My dad shook his head, arms crossed. We helped raise you, and now that you're successful, you just want to throw us out? I laughed out loud. Throw you out? No one invited you in the first place? My sister, always the entitled one, scoffed. Wow. So now you think you're better than us just because you bought a house? I took a deep breath. I knew this was coming. The guilt trip, the manipulation, the emotional blackmail. They had done it to me my whole life, making me feel like I owed them something. But this time, I was ready for it. No, I think I'm tired of being used. I let my words settle, watching their expressions shift. I worked my ass off for this house. I saved every penny while you guys spent yours on vacations, takeout, and new clothes. So, don't stand here and act like I owe you something. Silence. For once, they had nothing to say. But I wasn't done. You have 2 weeks, I don't care where you go, but in 14 days you're leaving. And if you don't, I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket and placed it on the table. A formal eviction notice. My mom gasped. My dad's face turned red. My sister's jaw dropped. You wouldn't dare, my mom whispered. I smiled. Try me. The game had changed. This was my house now. And they were about to learn what that really meant. After I dropped the eviction notice on the table, the silence was thick. My family, who had been so confident, so sure that they could guilt me into submission, now sat there completely stunned. But the best part? They didn't turn on me. They turned on each other. This is your fault, my mom snapped at my dad, slamming her hand on the table. You told me this was fine. You said we didn't have to worry about rent anymore. My dad threw his hands up. How was I supposed to know they'd suddenly grow a backbone? You think I planned for this? I raised an eyebrow but didn't say a word. Hearing them argue was more satisfying than I expected. Then my sister chimed in, her voice sharp and entitled. Oh, so you guys are just going to let this happen? You're just going to let me end up homeless? I turned to her, smirking. You have a job, don't you? She blinked, like she couldn't believe I'd actually call her out. Well, yeah, but then maybe it's time to start acting like an adult, I cut in. Because guess what? I've been taking care of myself for years. You should try it sometime. My dad sighed heavily, rubbing his temples like this was somehow his problem to fix. All right, fine. Let's just be reasonable here. Maybe we can come up with a compromise. I crossed my arms. A compromise? Like what? You all get to stay for free while I continue paying for everything? He cleared his throat. Well, maybe not free, but we could help out around the house. Do some chores, maybe cover a bill or two. I held up my hand. Number no deals, no compromises. You have 2 weeks, that's it. You figure out your next move, but it won't involve my house." My sister groaned, flopping back on the couch. My mom looked like she was about to start crying. My dad just shook his head. I could see it now, the panic settling in. For years, they had never worried about money, rent, or responsibility because they always assumed I'd handle it for them. But this time, they were on their own, and it was about time. The next morning, I woke up to something unusual. Instead of the usual chaos, my sister blasting music, my dad taking over the TV, my mom making herself comfortable in my kitchen, the house was silent. Too silent. I walked into the kitchen and found my mom cooking breakfast. Bacon, eggs, pancakes, the kind of meal she hadn't made since I was a kid. She turned and gave me a sweet, practiced smile. "Good morning, sweetheart. I made your favorite." I almost laughed. Oh, so now I was sweetheart? Just last night they were acting like I was the villain for wanting my house back. And now she was playing the loving mother? I pulled out a chair, arms crossed. "All right, what's the angle?" Her smile faltered just a little, but she kept going. "No angle. We realized we haven't been the best guests. We want to make it up to you." Right on cue, my dad walked in, acting way too casual. "Yeah, kiddo, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We don't want to fight. We just want to find a way to make this work." Make this work. I knew exactly what they were doing. They weren't apologizing because they actually felt bad. They were stalling, hoping I'd soften up, hoping I'd forget about the deadline, hoping that with enough fake kindness I'd cave and say, "Fine, you can stay." Not happening. I let them go through their whole charade, the home-cooked meals, the fake politeness, the sudden interest in my day. Even my sister, who never lifted a finger, started helping by wiping the counters or taking out the trash. It was laughable. By the end of the day, my mom sat down beside me, sighing dramatically. "See, isn't this nice? A happy home, all of us together?" I turned to her and smiled. "It is nice. It'll be even nicer when I have my home to myself again in 13 days. Her face dropped. The fake warmth disappeared in an instant, replaced by pure frustration. "You're really going to do this?" she snapped, dropping the act completely. "You're really going to throw your own family out?" I stood up, taking my plate to the sink. "No, I'm telling my grown, capable family that they need to figure out their own living situation, just like I did, and just like you expected me to." I walked out of the kitchen before she could argue, leaving them sitting there with their failed manipulation attempts. They thought they could guilt me into backing down. They had no idea how wrong they were. After their fake kindness routine failed, my family did what they always did when they didn't get their way. They threw a fit. It started with passive-aggressive comments. "Wow, must be nice to have no heart," my sister muttered as she walked past me. "Some people actually value family." My mom sighed dramatically while folding laundry that wasn't hers. "I worked hard to raise you, and this is the thanks I get?" My dad grumbled from the couch. I ignored them. I had no interest in playing their game. But when that didn't work, they escalated. My dad started hogging the bathroom in the mornings, knowing I had to get ready for work. My mom suddenly had long, emotional phone calls right outside my bedroom door at night, keeping me up. My sister? She started bringing people over, loud friends, unannounced, at all hours of the night. They wanted to make my life so miserable that I'd beg them to stay just to have peace. But what they didn't realize, I could play this game better than them. I cranked up my alarm an hour earlier than usual, making sure it blasted loud enough to wake everyone up. I started locking my bedroom door at night so my mom's fake sobbing sessions didn't bother me. And when my sister's friends got too comfortable lounging in my living room, I walked in and turned off the Wi-Fi. Within minutes, they were scrambling for their phones, groaning about stupid signal problems. My sister shot me daggers. "Really? That's what we're doing now?" she hissed. I shrugged. "Weird, huh? Guess some things just stop working when people take advantage." It wasn't just about getting them out. It was about making sure they never wanted to come back. And if they thought their little tantrum was going to break me, they were about to be sorely disappointed. After their tantrums failed, my family's attitude took a sharp turn into full-blown desperation. They had officially run out of manipulation tactics, and now they were scrambling. First, they tried bargaining. My dad cornered me in the kitchen one morning, trying his best to sound reasonable. "Look, maybe we can work something out. We can start pitching in. We don't have to pay full rent, but maybe just cover a bill or two." I took a sip of my coffee, unbothered. You mean pay a fraction of the costs to live in a house you never asked permission to move into? I set my mug down and met his eyes. Number, the deadline stands. He let out a frustrated sigh, rubbing his temples. He knew it wasn't going to work. He was just grasping at straws now. Then my mom tried guilt-tripping me one last time. I just don't know where we'll go, she sniffled, sitting dramatically on the couch like she was auditioning for a soap opera. It's not like we have many options. If you could just give us a little more time. I cut her off. You had time, 10 years of it while I was working my ass off to get to this point. You didn't worry about where I'd go when I left home at 18. You didn't worry about my struggles. But now, I'm supposed to worry about you. Her face twisted in frustration. She knew I wasn't budging, but the worst was my sister. Instead of begging, she went full spite mode. Fine, whatever, throw us out, but don't come crying to us when you realize how lonely it is to have no family. I laughed, actually laughed. You mean the same family that never supported me? The same family that used me every chance they got? If that's what I'm losing, then trust me, I'll be just fine. And with that, they had nothing left. They knew this was over. They just didn't want to accept it. With just a few days left before my deadline, my family had officially hit rock bottom. The fake kindness had failed. The guilt trips had failed. The tantrums had failed. Now they were just silent. It was almost funny. For weeks they had been loud, demanding, invasive, but now they barely spoke to me. It was like they thought if they ignored me, I'd magically forget that their time was up. I didn't. On the morning of moving day, I walked into the living room, where they were all sitting like a bunch of sulking teenagers. It's time, I said, arms crossed. My dad let out a deep sigh, rubbing his temples. So that's it? You're really kicking out your own parents? I raised an eyebrow. Oh, I'm sorry. Were you under the impression that this was still up for debate? My mom tried one last time. We don't even have a place lined up yet. I shrugged. Not my problem. They just stared at me, like they couldn't believe I was actually following through, like they thought at the last second I'd crack and say, fine, stay a little longer. But I didn't. I grabbed a stack of moving boxes and placed them in front of them. You have until tonight. Whatever's not packed is getting tossed. That was the final push they needed. For the next few hours I watched as they reluctantly packed up their things, muttering under their breath the entire time. My sister slammed cabinets. My mom sighed dramatically every 5 minutes. My dad refused to make eye contact. But at the end of the day, they left. And when I locked the door behind them, standing in my house, surrounded by my space, with nothing but silence around me, I had never felt more at peace. The second the door shut behind them, I exhaled. For the first time in months, the house was quiet. No TV blaring in the background. No passive-aggressive comments muttered under breath. No freeloaders taking up every inch of my space. Just me, in my home. Finally. I walked through each room, soaking in the silence. It felt different now. Lighter. Like the house could finally breathe without them suffocating it. That night, I did something I hadn't been able to do since they moved in. I cooked a meal, just for myself. I curled up on the couch without having to fight for space. I took a long, hot shower without someone banging on the door, demanding their turn. And when I went to bed, I slept like a baby. I didn't check in on them. I didn't ask where they went. I didn't care. For years, I had been made to feel like their success was my responsibility. Like my hard work belonged to all of us. Like I was selfish for wanting something of my own. But the truth, I never owed them anything. And now, they finally had to face the real world without using me as a crutch. Sometimes, the hardest thing to do is set boundaries with family. But, trust me, if they don't respect your space, your effort, or your success, they don't deserve access to it. Have you ever had to cut off entitled family members who thought they had a right to your life? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And if you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more insane Reddit-style stories. See you in the next one.